Hello and welcome to Inside Indiana Business. I'm Gary Dick. General Motors workers are on strike at 55 GM facilities in 19 states across the country. That includes some 7,000 union workers right here in Indiana. Now here's a look at the plants across the state affected by the strike. The biggest, the truck assembly plant in Fort Wayne, has about 4,500 workers. And both the Marion stamping plant and Bedford casting operation have about 900 union workers. And in Kokomo, there's a components holding plant with about 300 workers there. Now, GM and the United Auto Workers Union continue negotiations as nearly 50,000 workers nationwide continue on the picket lines instead of clocking in for work. Here now with perspective and the impact, what the impact could be from the strike. I am pleased to be joined by Ball State University Director of the Center for Business and Research, Mike Hicks. And Mike, is always welcome.
Good to be with you.
Okay, we haven't really dealt with one of these. I remember covering many strikes back in the 70s and 80s, but these don't seem to come along as often. As you look, does either side have leverage here?
Well, I think GM probably is approaching this in a better position. Good profitability this year. The economy is slowing, so they may not be as anxious to get everybody back on the production line right now. And the UAW faces a really existential problem with membership. They're well off their high of 1.5 million back in the late 70s, lost 8% in 2018 at a time when manufacturing employment rose. So this is sort of an existential crisis for them to expand, or at least expand membership or control the bleeding at this point.
So the UAW, they want members, right? They want membership. What's the GM after? Some work rules, flexibility, those
right. So GM really wants to maintain membership for their current members and expand it to those second-tier workers that are now getting less benefits and fewer wages. And then GM really needs, more than anything else, is flexibility down the road. They face an uncertain future. Their cars aren't selling well. Their trucks are selling well. They're looking at the EV or hybrid market. And so that's going to take different plant and equipment and a very different workforce in many places. So they need that flexibility over the next decade or so.
As you look at the potential impact here in Indiana, the strike's only a few days old here, but is the impact that could happen here different than it would have been, say, 10 years, 15, 20 years ago when union membership was much higher? Right.
Well, if we look back, the last strike with 2007, that was 48 hours. The strike before that was 21 days. So we're now into a big strike. Yeah, certainly much bigger employment. We had about 250,000 more manufacturing workers back in the late 90s. A good many of them were UAW workers. We're down to really 4 plants being struck. The big effect will be in Fort Wayne, but it'll be felt more in Kokomo and Bedford and Marion because they're smaller communities.
Yeah. Let's talk about Fort Wayne, the only GM final assembly plant, truck assembly plant there. And GM has looked at that plant really in a positive light, investing a lot of money there.
Right. So in the wake of the Daniels reform to our tax system in the Great Recession, GM looked around and said, wow, Indiana's a great place to do business. Put about $80 billion if memory serves right in that plant, which I think is a good signal that that facility is going to be safe for a long time. I think the other places are more nimble, pretty high productivity, so I think they're reasonably safe. The danger for the UAW is membership in the older plants in Ohio and Michigan.
Okay, as we wrap up here, as you look into the crystal ball, how do you see this going? I mean, there's no way to really tell, obviously, but in terms of if this is going to be a prolonged strike, or do you think both sides have some incentive maybe to come to an agreement?
Well, so the UAW members want to come to agreement. The UAW can't give a lot on its membership goals. I think by GM pulling the health benefits at the start of the next month, 1st of October, I think that signals this is going to be a longer strike. They wouldn't have risked that amount of ill will if they thought this was going to be over tomorrow or next week.
All right, it's a big story in the manufacturing sector in Indiana. General Motors strike continues. Mike Hicks from Ball State University. As always, thanks very much.
Thank you.
All right.